Time now for our press review, and I'm joined once again in the studio by Erin Ogunkoye. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Axie.
There are new revelations that the 3 Israeli hostages accidentally killed by the Israeli army had written "help," also SOS, on the building that they'd been staying in. What are papers saying about that today, Erin?
Yeah, they had written that both in Hebrew and in English, help and SOS. Now, an editorial in the Jerusalem Post today essentially argues that the Israeli public has accepted that Israel must do whatever it takes and for however long it takes to complete its stated goal of eliminating Hamas during this operation in the Gaza Strip. The implication, of course, being that this is simply a tragic consequence of what's turning into one of the country's longest and most intense wars. The piece ultimately concluding that the incident didn't really lead to any more than a few scattered calls to reassess the operation, suggesting that the public simply accepts the risks involved. Now, I have a totally different editorial piece from Haaretz, the editorialist writing that she wants to believe the IDF claim that the Israeli military does not shoot people who have surrendered, but she says that's just not credible. I quote, "The bombs falling on Gaza have also killed thousands of people who are begging for their lives. Israeli soldiers have also," she writes, shot unarmed civilians in incidents that have been captured on camera, not only in Israel, but also in the West Bank and in Gaza, she adds, suggesting that the military really needs to change course if it wants to have a legacy that's anything other than a colossal failure.
And Erin, in some other news, it's International Migrants Day today. That coming as migrants here in France say they're facing tougher and tougher treatment.
Yeah, that's right. As the government makes a last-ditch attempt to save its immigration reform law today, French paper L'Humanité actually spoke to migrants, both documented and undocumented, about the difficulties that they're already facing and how their lives could be made even more difficult if this bill does pass. Amongst the most criticized measures and the most difficult for the people quoted in this piece are the prospect of limiting or even scrapping health care for illegal immigrants, tightening rules for the entry and settlement of family members of documented immigrants, and then finally this idea that employers may have a lot of power over who obtains residency permits and who doesn't, especially in the sectors where migrants tend to occupy most jobs. Now, Le Figaro, the right-wing paper, for its part, says that if no agreement is found on Monday, Macron will scrap the bill. He could even put in place a government reshuffle. This paper describing then this next step as lose-lose. If the text is adopted, on the one hand, the government will maybe save face, but it'll also be at the expense of essentially succumbing to the right, if not a bit the far right. And if the text fails, it'll mark Emmanuel Macron's worst legislative failure since his rise to power. Finally, for Le Monde today, no matter what happens, there is one major takeaway, the piece argues, from the fiasco that surrounded the passage and the debates around this bill. And that's that the topic of immigration can essentially no longer be seen as the catch-all for all of society's ills. While some of the issues that the right and the far right often linked to immigration may be slightly connected, this editorial piece argues that they are clearly distinct. How can people be made to think that the solution to urban riots or the concentration of poor people in social housing can be found in controlling immigration? He also concludes that it is really essential to remind European voters that policing is not the only solution to illegal migration. Sometimes dynamics that we see in international affairs in general explain migratory flows, and that too needs to be taken into account by governments when they're looking at how to change their immigration laws.
And Erin, we stay in France for your next story. New revelations about the actor Gérard Depardieu.
Yeah, this is in Libération today. As a reminder, over a dozen, as many as 15, at least really, I should say 15 different women accused this actor of a range of different sexual offenses, sexual harassment, violence, even rape. Now, one of the women to accuse him of sexual abuse in 1982, when she was 19 years old, still a teenager, is actress Emmanuelle Desbiver, who actually died of a suspected suicide earlier this month. Now, Libération spoke to a key witness who could essentially confirm the assault that took place that she had accused Depardieu of, and also spoke to the impunity that he benefited from throughout his entire career, really. The paper writing that the cinema industry in France long tolerated sexual aggression, was one in which powerful men could essentially do what they wanted, and I quote, where misogyny was as natural as breathing. Now, on a similar theme, but in a much different milieu and across the Atlantic, the Wall Street Journal, meanwhile, carried out an investigation demonstrating that the late American financier Jeffrey Epstein continued to abuse young women even after his 2008 conviction for soliciting and procuring a minor for prostitution. Now, even though powerful people like Bill Gates and Bill Clinton said that they believed that Epstein had changed after that conviction, this investigation from the Wall Street Journal, which includes access to a trove of documents, including Epstein's private emails, his diary entries, show that he continued to sexually exploit women, all while maintaining a vast social life with the rich and the powerful.
And Erin, you're ending on a story about some long-awaited progress for black actors and actresses in Hollywood.
Yes, a new provision within the SAG-AFTRA labor union and an agreement reached with Hollywood executives will allow performers to ensure that the makeup process and the hairstyling process is more equitable, no matter their skin tone or hair texture. Now, this is because it'll allow these actors and actresses to essentially let their productions team know what they need for their different, hair and makeup needs. And if that production team fails to hire a stylist that can fulfill that, these actors and actresses will have the right to find someone themselves who can do the job properly and to be, of course, reimbursed for it. Now, this is based on decades of predominantly black performers, it must be said, feeling like the specificities either of their skin tone or their hair texture were not taken into account, often leading to dangerous consequences. People losing their hair, people having rashes on their faces when, the texture of their facial hair, for example, wasn't sufficiently taken into consideration. So this is a big, major change, particularly for actors and actresses of color who say that they finally feel that they've been listened to after decades of alerting the industry to this problem.
Erin Ogunkiye with a look through the international press today. Thank you.